Welcome to Why Oh Why, the podcast where we talk about things with an element of mystery, confusion, or misrepresentation. I'm Matt Hartless. I'm a musician and journalist.
I'm AJ Hill. I'm a comedian and idiot.
And this week we're going to be talking about Dejima.
Dejima, yes. So, Matthew, what do you know about Shogun Japan? And
I know very little, but I would like to do the housekeeping first.
Oh, yeah.
So you can... If you like what you're hearing, you can support us on buymeacoffee.com/Y0YMCR and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at the moment, where it will be Y0Y Podcast. Oh, there's also a bonus episode. It's already up. There might be more bonus episodes coming by the time this goes out, but there are definitely more in the pipeline. But yeah, for now, so Shogun era Japan.
Yeah.
So this is pre... the period that we're going to be talking about.
No,
I presume.
it's pretty much the period.
Oh, it's pretty much the period. So the Edo period.
Yeah, the Edo period. Yeah. So just so you know, after this, we're going to watch this film called G.I. Samurai with Sonny Chiba. If you don't know who Sonny Chiba is, he was in Kill Bill, but you might remember him more from True Romance because they go and see a Sonny Chiba triple bill, and that's where Christian Slater has a prostitute sweep him off his feet, which is what we're all hoping for in life, isn't it? So yeah, basically, this movie is about a platoon of Japanese soldiers who get sucked into a time vortex, and they find themselves in the Edo period of Japan. Sonny Chiba basically says to his platoon to get back in the time slip, the only way to sort of get back to our own time is to beat history. So they just they start attacking samurais with their guns and tanks. It's great.
Fantastic. That sounds great. We'll have a great laugh watching that, I am sure.
Right. So Shogun era of Japan, Edo period, was a very warring time in Japan, in Japanese history. So basically, there were lots of shoguns. You had the emperor, who was the top of the caste.
Yeah.
And then you had the court nobility. Then you had the shogun. Then you had the daimyo. I always do the episodes, Matt, with the words that I can't pronounce. So
don't worry. Next time it's my turn to say lots of Turkish and Kurdish words.
Good.
So
then you got the samurai, then the peasants, then the craftsmen and the merchants. So that's the order of things.
Yeah. So the shoguns are near the top then.
Shogun's near the top, yeah. It gets a bit complicated because we're going to be talking about a gentleman called Ieyasu Tokugawa, who was born in 1543, and he was a very ambitious fellow. Mm-hmm. And he became the main shogun in Japan, and basically his sort of reign, as it were, lasted until 1886. I think 1886 when his descendant died. So his descendant died.
Right.
And
okay.
The shogunate basically then got cancelled for reasons that we're going to find out about.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah.
But yeah, so he was called the Badger. He was known as the Badger, the old Badger. Okay.
He was Brian May.
Yeah. And he was quite the fighter. Tokugawa, between 1633 and 1639, made the Sakuco Edicts, which basically wanted to get rid of Western influence from Japan and get rid of foreign influence. So there's several reasons for this. One being, you know how we live in Britain, right?
Yeah, I'm aware.
So we live in Britain. And you get these old blokes who go, these dirty foreigners coming over here, being dirty foreigners, messing up this country, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, in the case of Japan, foreigners were dirty. So the Japanese used to wash every day. So they'd have a bath every day.
Oh, right, yeah. And during this time, hygiene was not...
Yeah, during this time, the Europeans wouldn't wash for months. They were known as the Southern Barbarians.
Oh, right, okay.
That's what they were called. Basically, they would eat with a knife in their hands, whereas you and I just having had a lovely Japanese meal, the Japanese at this time were eating with chopsticks. So the Japanese were quite civilized, and the Europeans weren't.
Yeah.
And they just kept mucking things up. So there was lots of Portuguese missionaries around, and the Portuguese missionaries, wherever they went, Portuguese tradesmen would go. And Tokugawa realized that what was happening was that. So the second in command, the people under the shogun. So the people under the shogun, basically,
it was the daimyos.
The daimyos, the district leaders. They basically would just start making money from having Christians around who were trading, and making lots of money, and so that because they were getting richer, their influence would spread.
Okay.
Tokugawa wanted to consolidate his power, basically. What happened then was that he was like, this needs to stop. So we need to get rid of them. So they started booting people out of the country. And in 1634, they built Dejima. So Dejima was built in 1634, which was an artificial island off the coast of Nagasaki Bay, which was a very deep bay. So the thing about Japan, which traders loved, was that it had very deep bays. So obviously you could
get massive ships in there.
Massive ships, with loads of stuff on it. So the Portuguese built this island in 1633, and then in 1634 the Dutch moved on there. And this period, basically, they decided that what they were going to do was they were just solely going to trade with the Chinese, the Dutch, and the Portuguese. Now, the Dutch and the Portuguese had to stay on Dejima, which means exit island. So it means exit island. They had to stay there, and it was fan-shaped. It was a 9,000 square meter fan-shaped island. And so
that's quite incredible that was made in 1633.
It is, yeah. I mean, when you think about artificial islands, because it's quite interesting because the Japanese still do that to this day, because they're obviously in a lot of places they're sort of limited on space because it's a very
mountainous country, and then where they can sort of have cities and stuff, their cities are crowded,
very densely populated. Tokyo.
I believe it's the biggest city in the world, isn't it? The most populated city in the world.
It's
I mean,
definitely the most populated city in the world. I don't know about the biggest, but it's massive. It's like, are you?
Just 25 million people live there. Thereabouts.
Something like that. Have you ever? Are you a Judge Dredd fan? Judge
Dredd.
Yeah.
Basically, all I know about Judge Dredd is the classic Sylvester Stallone scene. It's the law.
Oh dear. Well,
that's basically all I know about Judge Dredd.
Yes. Well, you should definitely watch Carl Urban as Judge Dredd, because he's a better Judge Dredd than.
I've heard this.
Sylvester Stallone. Sylvester Stallone is quite a controversial figure in Judge Dredd circles, because he takes his helmet off within no time at all.
Oh right, and he's not supposed to
take his helmet off. Yeah. But the point that I was bringing that up is because Tokyo is basically as close to Mega City 1 as is possible. It's just a huge expanse of an urban area that's densely populated. Like when you're flying over it, you look down, it just looks like a massive tumor on the planet. Basically, it's just a big, grey area surrounded by green, because as you say, it's a very mountainous country.
Yeah.
So they didn't quite have this problem at the time. Tokyo was called Edo then.
Yes.
And it wasn't as densely populated as Japan is now. But the point is that the Europeans had to stay on Dejima Island.
Yeah.
The Chinese could live in Nagasaki. So for a while, eventually that got changed.
So that's basically my knowledge on Dejima kind of ends there, in that it was sort of the meeting point between worlds, i.e. the Dutch and Portuguese were allowed to go to Dejima and everywhere else in the world except for Japan, and the Japanese were allowed in Japan and to go to Dejima to trade, but they weren't allowed out.
It's worse than that, because of these rules that were implemented, Japanese merchants who were not on the mainland when they were put in place couldn't go home.
Oh.
So yeah, they were not allowed to.
They just sailed home and said, "Oh, I'm back from my fishing trip."
You're barred, mate. No entry at the club. You've got the wrong shoes on. So that's what happened with them.
Reminds me of a time when I used to live in a flat in a terrace house that was just converted into flats. And somebody, like near the end of the time I was living there, somebody kicked the front door in because they clearly got very drunk, and I think they probably thought like they'd forgotten that they didn't live there anymore, or maybe they just got the wrong address and they were trying to get in a few doors down. But yeah, they'd kicked the door in. They clearly realised that they were in the wrong house, and then it just like left their takeaway by way of saying sorry. And left.
Really?
Yeah. So that just reminded me of that. People coming back going, yeah, we're Japanese. I'm going home now. Oh, it's all changed. This isn't my home anymore, and I'm now no longer considered Japanese. Well,
yeah. I mean, damn. It was a very strange time. So on the actual island itself, the only Japanese people that were allowed on the island were prostitutes. So prostitutes were the only people allowed to female prostitutes were the only people allowed on the island to service the Dutch
Traders.
traders. Yeah. So
Well, yeah,
interestingly
and
enough,
this created a thing where then the children born of when it happened, children born in that way were like basically they were confined to Dejima, weren't they? They couldn't go with the Europeans because they were too Japanese to be allowed to do that, but they weren't Japanese enough to be allowed into Japan. So Dejima became their universe.
Yeah, so they had different words for the Japanese prostitutes. I've put this up here. The prostitutes that could service the Dutch traders were called Aranda Yuki, and the Chinese had Karayuki. And karaoke, because they were fantastic singers. But the thing is that like the Dutch traders had to pay, Dutch and Portuguese traders had to pay significantly more for the prostitute services than the Chinese men. I don't know why, but that's just something that happened. I assume possibly because they didn't bathe. So if you're a prostitute,
right, yeah,
are you really going to want to, sleep with somebody who hasn't had a bath in
a few months? Yeah. So, well, basically, they had to bribe them to. Yeah.
But you're right.
They were so ugly. They had to pay prostitutes more to have sex with them.
But there was very interesting things that happened with these prostitutes. Because the reason I wanted to bring up these prostitutes is because it was quite fascinating. So the Chinese had less restrictions, but eventually they got more restrictions put on them in 1635, I believe.
It didn't last long then. A year.
A couple of years, a year.
They fucked it. What did they do? That's what I want to know. After a year, they were like, "Fuck these guys."
No, it was later than that. There was a Chinese settlement set up in 1688. So and basically what would happen is the Japanese prostitutes weren't allowed to stay in the settlement for more than one night, so they had to leave in the morning and go past some guards. But the thing about that is, they obviously, people being people, they fall in love. So what some Japanese Karayuki... No, that's not Karayuki-san. Karayuki-san's Japanese prostitutes that sleep with Japanese men. They've got... See, regulations... It's very complex.
Yeah, all this red tape.
There's a lot
Bloody
of red tape
Brussels.
around sex. Yeah. Kyoto! No, yeah, so basically, the prostitutes would sneak back in. They would literally step over their footsteps so they could get back in without being noticed, so they could be with their loved ones. But yeah, so it was really, really regulated.
So, apart from shenanigans with prostitutes, what other kind of shit went down in Dejima then? What sort of interesting things happened that might have threatened the status quo?
So, well, the thing that threatened the status quo was that, like, literature would leak in. So, the literature... In fact, this is a good time to talk about a certain individual called Engelbert Campher. So Engelbert Campher was born in 1651 and he died in 1716. And he was a German naturalist, physician, explorer and writer. And basically, for a while, he was the only person that we knew information about Japan and Japanese culture. He was allowed... Yeah. So basically, the people from Dejima, the traders, and Engelbert Campher, they got told to go to see the emperor. So they went to see the emperor, and he made...
The emperor killed them all.
No. It's better than that. It's way better than that, Matthew. The emperor... I'm laughing at it. The emperor made this physician, Engelbert Campher, dance for him for several hours. So the emperor was behind a bamboo screen, and he made Engelbert Campher just dance. And like Engelbert Campher found this very rude because like... you might.
I'm
a German naturalist. I've written a book on the history of Japan.
Why are you making me do this?
Why are you making me dance?
What is the point?
So he made medical observations, but yeah, as he had to dance for the emperor, and the emperor basically every time he stopped dancing, the emperor just kept saying, "No, you dance for me." But yeah, so for a very long period of time, our understanding of Japan came from Engelbert Campher, but also having that kind of mixture where they were allowed from Dejima to go and see the emperor, Western influence was still getting into Japan. So this is a perfect opportunity to talk about the criminal corpse, actually.
The criminal corpse.
The criminal corpse. So, Rongoku.
Let's
have a look. I'll just make sure that I'm spelling that right. Rongoku is the study of Dutch culture by Japanese people.
Ah, okay.
And this started largely because of...
Was it the study of Dutch culture in the same way that the 18 to 30 kind of holidays study Dutch culture? Just an excuse to smoke loads of weed.
Well, actually, what happened was that basically in 1774 there was a Dutch medical text that they found and they were passing around, and what the Japanese physicians realized was that there was lots of detailed illustrations in the book of the anatomy, which they had absolutely no knowledge of whatsoever. They got a criminal corpse. Now, the criminal corpse was a dead old woman.
Dead old woman.
A dead old woman.
Was she a criminal?
She was a criminal. She'd been committing some petty crimes and they murdered her for it.
Oh, right.
Or
Okay.
not
That's basically, Shogun era Japan.
Yeah, so they
isn't it? Just
execute this sweet little old lady because she'd been doing some dodgy things. And then in the sort of like main courtyard, in a courtyard, they basically dissected her. And what they were doing was the Japanese physicians were pointing out the organs that the Japanese knew about. Yeah. And then when they didn't know the name of something, they were pointing to the text and going, they know what that is. Yeah. We don't know what that is. So some physicians actually set about like translating this book, which took them, I think, 5 or 6 years. It took them a long time to translate it, to find out what was actually happening in the outside world. It's the whole thing. This whole thing with Dejima and like isolationism. I
mean, you'd think it'd
really
be just
weird.
easier to just go to someone who was Dutch and say, "What does this say?" And then they'd be able to tell you.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you did that, being were obvious about it, then obviously that would be treason. I'm guessing.
You can get in trouble.
Couldn't do that
because quite often Western things were prohibited. So Western things were you're not supposed to have these things. So obviously it has been the history of medicine that think that a lot of things in medicine have been prohibited. So it used to be illegal to cut up corpses to find out what was going on inside of them. I mean, it still is for certain people today. You can't. Me and you couldn't just go cutting up a corpse.
Well, yeah.
Digging around.
Yeah, Burke and Hare kind of thing. Just
exactly. What's going on?
Yeah, we can't just go down the local cemetery and just go, all right. Biology lesson.
What's going on? Yeah, but yeah. So there was just lots of things that were very secretive. They were passing around Bibles. Bibles was a big thing because the Portuguese missionaries, before they got banned, they were like, "Look, Japan is a godless country. It's not. It's got Shintoism, which is a wonderful religion, and it's got Buddhism, Buddhism was kind of like not really wanted as well. But the point is that like a missionary would spend all his life, because they're always he's back in the day, he'd spend all his life in Japan trying to teach the word of God. If we only got one Japanese convert, it would be worth a whole life spent sort of trying to convert people to the word of Christ, the power of Christ. And obviously in this Shogun era, when things were pretty volatile, people were considering death, so actually they got a lot of traction. So there were Bibles around that people couldn't really read. That's the problem. How do you sort of like learn about Christ if you can't read the language? Which was a big problem in Catholicism because it was all in Latin, so that it wasn't really for the common folk to understand. But yeah, either way, so it was banned. It was all banned. Things were banned, but it was like, hey, psst, hey, it's like in Soviet Russia where it was like any Western stuff. If you got like, I've got this record, I've got like a new Beatles record, that kind of stuff. It was a very similar sort of vibe. Obviously, they didn't have LPs back in the 18th century.
No.
But yes.
Well, we don't know because so little information came out of Japan at that point. Maybe they did. Maybe they did have LPs.
This is true.
And vinyl players.
But the problem is that
never found out about.
So during this period, sort of 220 years, things stabilized in Japan, but that actually caused massive social problems because of things stabilizing. So you had a whole samurai class. Samurais were like employed by the what's they called, damamu?
Oh, the demios.
Demios, that's it.
Yeah.
I need to write that on my hand. I should write this down on my hand. The demios, so the demios, they would just always call them samurais, like, I need help. You need to defend this area. We need to go to war.
Right,
but
yeah.
like once there's no war,
They're kind of mercenaries.
they're not mercenaries, because a mercenary would be somebody who's masterless. So that's like a Ronin. A Ronin's more of a mercenary. A Ronin was a masterless samurai.
Right, okay.
Who would go around from place to place, like
kind
being
of like-
a muscle for hire. But
Yeah. So kind of like in sort of like Game of Thrones parlance, it's the banners. Like, you know, you
Well-
get all your leal lords to send you their soldiers.
I mean, I was just going to
defend,
talk more about our history. Yeah, like that's good. Yeah, you're right. But like
Yeah.
I would have said like more like the knights. So you know.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
our-
that's what
yeah.
that's what.
So
they
it's
are,
like
yeah, yeah.
sir. In this day and age, you get sirs. So the Queen goes out and knights like she goes and knights like Paul McCartney. Now, if anybody ever invaded the
Britain.
country,
Paul
Britain,
McCartney
Paul
would have to
McCartney
fight,
would be
yeah.
called up by the Queen to protect the land. So that's sort of what those lords would be doing. They'd be like you. So that's what the samurai were. The samurai were like the knights.
Hey, get out of my country.
Yeah. Sir Ringo Starr. Thomas was very angry because.
Yeah.
So, but basically, because Tokugawa was very successful at what he did. He was a master strategist. He basically helped stabilize the country, and so all these samurai had absolutely nothing to do. At the same time, the craftsmen and the merchants, who were the lowest in society, they actually started making quite a bit of money and were becoming quite prosperous. And so there was a lot of problems because samurai would be walking around with nothing to do, and the merchants were making a lot of money. So, and this just went on.
So the samurai were getting jealous, but did it end up becoming like you get once every few years you'll get a story come out about fire brigades who just start setting fires because they haven't got anything to do. Are we heading in that kind of direction? Like samurais would start just like inventing conflicts so they had something to do.
Not quite. I mean, so Japan, even to this day, Japan is very structured and it's got a lot of honor.
All right, so that would be dishonorable to do.
So
to do
yeah,
that,
it would. But the problem is that was the problem. The problem is that the samurai were there to sort of keep the peace. They were keepers of the peace. They're a bit like Jedi's.
Right.
So like in the prequels, you see the Jedi's.
Yeah,
as
with their
keepers
council.
of the peace.
Yeah,
and they're like that. But the problem is that they were pissy. They were drunkards. So a lot of them would just be going around the country, just getting hammered, and anything they saw as a slight, they would just go, right, I'm going to kill you. And because they were the only people allowed to carry two swords on them.
Right.
So they had a big sword and a smaller sort of dagger, which I don't know the name of. But if you want to do your homework and let me know, dear listener, look it up.
Yeah, we can't hold your hand throughout the whole thing. It's
First person.
lasted for if you listen to this podcast episode thinking you were going to get detailed scientific analysis of over 200 years of Japanese cultural and political history, then you were very mistaken.
This is not what this is. This is just an excuse for me and Matthew to chat about stuff that we don't understand to one another, and then you guys can sort of figure out for yourself.
We just
it's
stick some
something
mics in front. We'd be doing this anyway if we weren't having
exactly.
recorded a podcast. We thought we might as well try and make some sort of work and money out of it.
But you know what a samurai is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like Darth Vader, except Japanese. Darth Vader is a weeb.
A weeb. What's a weeb?
A weeb is someone who loves Japanese culture and wants to be Japanese, even though they're not Japanese.
Oh, I see. I know quite a few people who are like that.
Yeah, but Japanese culture is very weird. So with this caste system, it just became very complex. The samurai were not getting the work. They meant to be defending people and fighting people, and they just had nothing to do. So they were often going to the pleasure district in Edo.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up actually, because that's the kind of the fall of the feudal system in the West is kind of a similar thing.
Yeah.
That's why there've been like quite a lot of civil wars and like kind of like little kind of very pointless wars between two countries in Europe is kind of the same thing. It's just like the peasants end up kind of moving above the nobles. Because they're making more money because peacetime and there's profit, and the nobles have absolutely nothing to do because so they end up getting poorer and have less power because they're not really able to influence anything.
Well, one problem that you have in feudal society and this caste system in Japan is that what happens with nobles and people high up is that they have children and then they have to divide their riches amongst their children. So their children sort of stay in the same caste, but the actual pot of land and resources gets divided up into smaller and smaller portions. So that is a massive issue which happened, and that obviously was happening with the daimyos. It's like, well, you're not like at this time, like children were seen as a resource, so you would marry children off to but it's not easy. Like obviously men were sort of seen as a bigger sort of prize. If you had a male heir, that's what you wanted. There were female samurai. Female samurai were there to defend the home, and obviously if an enemy combatant took over the home, you were there, you couldn't have them disgrace you, so it was seppuku. Seppuku is a samurai's death, so that's where you get a sword and you
so that was the reason for having female samurai, was that if they ended up making a tit out of who was trying to rob the house and they killed themselves.
They're like Klingons. Just honor's very important to them. Yeah. So they don't have the bumpy foreheads, but they have all the swords. So that's what they do. They just cut themselves open and watch their retinas fall out. Because that's what friends do.
Blimey.
Blimey indeed. So why? Honor is why, folks. That's what it is. Honor is the main reason for everything, and also power and profit. So that's it.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about this though, about Dejima in this period of history in Japan, which is why I was interested in doing an episode on it, is that because of that isolationist thing for such a long period of time, is that Japanese culture has developed in a very different way to culture anywhere else in the world, and it seems very silly and absurd to us, a lot of these things, but it is sort of a very interesting kind of like a petri dish of how culture and society develops without external influences.
So as you know, I've been to Japan.
Yes.
And you're right, Japan, when you get to Japan, it's very interesting because it's the most technologically advanced society on the planet.
Yeah.
But it's also steeped in tradition. So you've got this very strange mishmash of like very traditional like structures. So for example,
women are not treated particularly well in Japan, are they?
So
I guess better now than back in the Edo period. But
so we're talking about samurais. Samurais still exist to this day, but obviously they don't go around with swords. So, Akira Kurosawa.
Yes, Seven Samurai.
Samurai, but the director himself, that's The Hidden Fortress. That's the movie that George Lucas ripped off for Star Wars.
Oh, right, okay.
So, but however, Akira Kurosawa. Sorry to any Japanese listeners.
Kurosawa.
I am butchering your language. I think you're all wonderful. But yeah, Akira Kurosawa, he was of samurai class. So he's descended from samurai. Most high-up salarymen is a term for corporate business types in Japan. Most senior salarymen in Japanese industries, they are also samurai class. So like everything else, just when you're there, you don't really see it. To me, they're just all people. Foreigners are still a weird thing there for them. In fact, this is So Japanese, I think Japan is the most homogenous society on the globe, on the planet, country wise.
More so than North Korea?
Maybe not. But let's have a look. So Japanese population, I believe it's 99% Japanese.
Yeah. The thing is, I remember watching a documentary a few years ago about this bloke, and I can't remember what his name was, but he was English anyway, this guy. He was an English businessman, and he was made the CEO of, I can't remember which company it was, but it was a major Japanese electronics company anyway. It might have been Kodak or something like that. Or they might be Korean now that I've said that. But anyway, Fujifilm perhaps. Anyway, he was made the CEO, and basically he wasn't the CEO for a very long time because nobody listened to him or did anything that he wanted, because they were just like, well, he's not Japanese, he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
So he just he was out of a job within a few months because the tradition of how everything in the building worked, he didn't understand. And so he was just unable to communicate how he wanted the business to be run effectively at all. And everyone else who works at the company just, instead of trying to educate him, just looked at him as this idiot foreigner who's
So
ruining
yeah,
everything.
I was going to say, so he was Gaijin. You've literally just segued onto what I was about to say. He's Gaijin, right? So
Okay.
Gaijin just means foreigner. Now, the way that I got out of loads of scrapes in Japan, I wasn't in many scrapes, but basically I didn't know what the hell was going on, and I needed help from anybody. So I just used to go up to people and just go, can you help me? Baka Gaijin. Baka Gaijin means stupid foreigner. They loved it. As soon as I was like, I'm a stupid foreigner, they're like, yeah, you are. Come on, let's help you out. It was incredible. They're really polite. But yeah. So Baka Gaijin. Yeah. So that's what I kept saying to people. But yeah, the English teachers out there at the minute, you will always be an English teacher. You'll always be Gaijin, an English teacher. I've got a friend out there who is now translating video games because he can now speak Japanese fluently. However, he's still Gaijin. Like he's always going to be Gaijin, no matter how much he ingratiates himself into their culture, and he knows a lot and has Japanese children. Still Gaijin, you know. So it's very fascinating that basically all this stuff has still bled over.
I mean, you say that like that's peculiar to Japan, but I mean, you know, think of all the sort of racially motivated harassments we have in this country, where, you know, even third or fourth generation immigrants of Middle Eastern families or African or Caribbean families are still treated as foreigners, even though they've lived here their entire lives, and their parents and maybe even their grandparents as well.
I agree with you. I mean, it's very strange because the UK has a lot of similarities in some respects to Japan, in that, you know, we've got this rich, deep cultural history that we cling on to. So we cling on to it, and we cling on to our class structure. They have a class structure. We still cling on to it. I'm middle class. It doesn't matter if I'm not earning any money and I'm poor as anything, which I have been. Yeah. I'm still middle class. It's like, no, technically you're no class. You're an underclass. You are classless. You are not classy whatsoever. Yeah, you know, that's basically that. But like,
I think that's the one that describes me, not classy whatsoever. But
the point is though, that, like, I kind of get it with Japanese culture, because you're like, well, I'm a samurai. Look at these sweet swords. Look at the craftsmanship. Whereas in the UK, it's like you've got Terry with his mutant bloody bulldog, can't breathe properly. All right, I'm Terry. I've got this bulldog. It's called Spike. You know, like we have not got an amazing culture, in my opinion. Their culture is just, it fascinates me. It does fascinate me. But I suppose we should talk about how this all came to an end.
Yes.
Because
black ships.
The black ships, black ships. The only people who were allowed to trade with the Japanese, the only nations that are allowed to trade with the Japanese during this period were the Chinese, the Portuguese, and the Dutch.
Yeah. As you will notice, because I've used in the animation for this, I've animated a flag of the Dutch East India Trading Company. Yeah, for some reason, I struggle to say that. Trading. I've not even been drinking. The Dutch East India Trading Company.
The Dutch East India.
That's why that's there, if you were wondering.
Selling tea or whatever it was they sell. Probably not tea. Now, the Japanese didn't like lamb. They found it very peculiar.
Space cookies.
Space cookies, yeah. Well, this is it. Everybody
hash
loves...
brownies.
This is what I was going to say, yes. Dutch culture.
Chocolate sprinkles.
They explored Dutch culture to the fullest.
Windmills.
People were trying to illicit things by exploring Dutch culture to the fullest. I've done this, and I suppose you have as well. Like, who's not been to Holland to look at their fine wares? No. So
that's probably it. That's probably it, isn't it? Though you like windmills and clogs and tulips. Like you probably only find them interesting if you were really fucking high. And just it's like this is brilliant, man. It just goes round and round. It's amazing.
So there had been various times when they tried to sort of roll back on this isolationism. There was Kensai reforms in 1787. But this was when the course of growth was reversed. They were like, no, we don't need this. It's polluting our culture. Don't bring it in. But people were trading with pirates, and there was lots of stories out there in the wider world that like Japan was rich in natural resources and stuff like that. Now, fast forward to the 19th century, and the USA had settled in California.
Yes.
So they settled in California.
They'd manifested their destiny.
They had manifested their destiny, swept across the plains, gone to California, wagons rolled for a few generations. Uncle Alfie didn't make it, got eaten by a bear. But they did all make it Not all of them, because Alfie's dead, but they did make it to
California.
Yeah. And then they was met with this Pacific Ocean. There's a Pacific Ocean. And the Europeans had a monopoly on trade in most places. And the Americans didn't like this. So Commodore Matthew Perry was sent by the then president. Let's see if I can get his name.
Fillmore,
yes. It was President Millard Fillmore.
Millard
was like a Millard duck. Yes. So Millard Fillmore sent Perry to Japan, and he basically just said, open up trade with Japan, and if they refuse, attack them. So
that's America.
America. So in
look at our guns.
Yeah, in 1853, basically, these steamboats just appeared on the horizon of Japan, and they'd never seen that. So a load of wooden boats went out to sort of meet them with samurai and swords, saying you need to go to Nagasaki, and a load of like American troops with guns and cannons just went, no, we're going to stay here. And Perry actually sent a white flag over to them with a letter in Japanese.
So raise this.
No, it just basically went, if you don't let us, we're not going to go to Nagasaki. If you don't let us land and discuss things with you, we're just going to destroy you. And you might want to use this. It might come in handy. So Tokugawa, the latest Tokugawa, which was a different Tokugawa to the one that he was sick. So in July, it took a whole month. So it was June at this point. In July, they came back and they basically said, yeah, we'll trade with you. And so Perry said, look, I'll come back in a year and we'll discuss this further. Less than a year. He didn't give them a year. He came back, 1854 he came back, and they had a treaty in Yokohama. Now, I've been to Yokohama. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of... It's actually a district in Tokyo now.
Yes.
But a city in its own right. That's what I'm talking... So when I say, like, Judge Dredd makes a city one...
Tokyo has just swelled up.
It's just a massive district. Yeah. It's a prefecture. It's the biggest prefecture. I think it could be the biggest prefecture in Japan. I'm saying things that I don't quite know if I know the answer, but it's a massive prefecture in Japan. And so,
I don't think the Japanese embassy is going to come serve us for
no.
not knowing the exact facts of their geography. But.
No, but yes, so there was a building erected in Yokohama, and they went across to have this conversation, and the Treaty of Kanagawa was signed, and that was in February 1884. Yes, so there was certain things that were agreed by March. By March, they agreed certain things. First of all, that the US were permitted to access different ports, so Shimoga and Horodat, and the Japanese would assist any shipwrecked American sailors if necessary. American ships would purchase provisions exclusively from Japan, and the US would open up a consulate in Shimoda, which is interesting. You know, that's very... They hadn't had any consulates ever in Japan, so that was sort of the first thing. And so this was it. And basically also the Japanese would get whiskey, which is interesting because the Japanese got loads of gifts given to them, one of them being whiskey. I don't know if that was the first time they tasted whiskey, but I'd like to think it was, because if you don't know this, but Japan make the best whiskey in the world.
Do they? All right. Okay.
Better than Scotch whiskey, Scottish
listeners. I was going to say, like, of all the, they've not been doing trade with Britain and Ireland since time immemorial, and then the Americans come over with whiskey, and the Scots are, oh, God, I don't believe this. We fucking made that. Basically, it's my Graham Norton for some reason. Yeah. It was on that particular trade mission. So Japan, let me get this straight. Japan. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, they make the best whiskey, just so you know. It's amazing. This is not sponsored by a whiskey, but if you want to sponsor us, you can sponsor us with 3 bottles of booze. That'd be great. It was ratified. That treaty was ratified.
Yeah, we ain't getting Jamesons now.
We'll forget Jamesons. I'm not going to say no. But yes, that was ratified in 1855. That was ratified in 1855 by Emperor Komei. But it wasn't valid because the Shogun hadn't ratified it, and the Shogun was the one with the actual power. So it's kind of like the shogun's. It's kind of like prime minister, effectively. The prime minister's got the power and
Shogun Showdown.
Shogun Showdown, yeah. And there was a Harris Treaty in 1856, which basically superseded that and did ratify it. But this was the period where this was the point where the shogunate started to decline, because after the Americans had done this, all of a sudden all the countries were like, oh, so we just have to go over there and threaten them and they'll sign whatever we want. So all of a sudden all these different foreign powers were going over going, sign this, otherwise we'll just blow you to hell.
The British says, I can't believe we didn't go there first.
Yeah, so that's right.
Patting America on the head going, you've learned well, son, you've learned well.
Well, actually, the British were actually the death knell in the shogunate era. And there was two areas that were really sort of resistant to that, which was Satsuma and Choshu. They disagreed and they wanted isolation to be brought back in. They were like, we need to roll back on this. Because the main problem is that if your whole society is run on people who have swords as being the highest up, if you've got guns, your swords are useless. I've got a sword and I will chop you up. I've been training in this martial art for years. Bang.
You saw that Indiana Jones.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Interesting fact about that, that was improvised because he had the shits.
Yeah. No, I did know that. Yeah. It was just I can't.
I'm not going to do that. Imagine if you were that guy though. You're like, this is my big time to shine. I got to fall backwards. Yeah. Sir Harry Parkes, he went to Kyoto. He basically went to sign his own treaty for the UK, and he didn't go to Edo. He just completely ignored the emperor and went straight to Kyoto to sign here in 1865 to sign that, to have it, because he's like, I don't want to be with the symbolic sort of like leader. I want to be with the actual judicial seat. So he did that, and then daimyos from Satsuma and they went over to the UK. They were the ultra-conservative regions, prefectures. They were the ultra-conservative places that were like, we don't want it. We need isolationism. They went over to the UK, and when they go over to the UK, they were just like, oh my God. Like, these barbarians aren't barbarians anymore. They've really progressed. They've got stuff that we've never seen.
That was after the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. So like at that point,
trains. And,
so at that point, the UK was the most technologically advanced country in the world, and they were just like, my God, we are so far behind.
This might have been a mistake.
Yeah. So that was the point that ended. The shogun died, and then the Meiji period of restoration from 1868 to 1912 happened. But yeah, so it's very interesting, because the thing about all this, Matthew, is that basically it's all to do with politics. It's all to do with like wanting money, and it's all to do with trade. So obviously we live in the UK. Yeah. The UK has gone through Brexit. So Dejima means exit island, and now we live on Brexit Island. Brexit Island, which isn't fan-shaped, but it should be, because I need more fans. No. Because to make money, we're going to have to sign up to OnlyFans. No. No, but so basically...
I don't think anyone wants that.
I have actually got an OnlyFans page, which isn't active at the minute, because I only got one subscriber who didn't give me any money. My game in the amateur porn industry lasted very briefly. But the point is that, so due to our past and our collective consciousness of a glorified past, we have pulled away from the global economy and pulled away from dealing with foreigners, and we've kicked a lot of foreign people out.
Yeah.
However,
so what you're saying is, in a couple of 100 years, like some British people are going to go to other places in the world and go, because everyone else will have like teleports and they'll have the Matryoshka brain everywhere else, and we'll just be still living in Crewe.
Interesting that you should bring up
bring
up the episode of the
Fermi paradox.
Fermi paradox, because obviously this is one thing that they think if aliens ever came visiting, they'd be more technologically advanced and we'd just be at their mercy, which is exactly what happened to the Japanese. Yeah. Obviously, they asked the Americans to go to Nagasaki, which was a bit of a mistake because
as we all know, they really went there.
They really went there.
They went there hard.
I mean, that horrifies me to see that like twice in fairly modern history, Americans have just completely screwed over Japan. I've been to Hiroshima. I've been to the Hydro Center. They dropped a bomb on a hospital. That was the Hydro Center. Nice. I've been to the Peace Museum. It made me cry. The only building that actually remained standing in Hiroshima, the closest to the Hydro Center, I would say, was a European structure. So it's an actual European style structure. It's still there to this day. It's got scaffolding all up it to keep it up. But yeah, it's like a bombed out, like Western style building. But yeah, you can't. What we should learn from this is you can't keep out culture. You can't. We live in a globalized society.
Yeah, because it was like you were saying, like so much got through just in terms of text, even if they took 5 or 6 years to translate. And that's before the internet or anything like that. So trying to suppress other cultures from your culture is something that's hard to do and isn't going to work.
Tim Vert is the American astronaut who spent the most amount of time out of Americans in space. I think it was like 95 days. He was like 5 days off getting his... Oh, no, it was 190 days. It was 190 days. He spent a long time in space anyway. Yeah. But while he was
I was going to say 90 days, well, a long time.
Garrett Reisman spent 95 days, and you get a 100-day patch if you've been up there 100 days, but he was 95 days. Like, can't I just hang around here for the extra 5 days, guys? No, you can't get your scout badge. But, so...
I mean, what would have happened if he'd just said no? What were they going to do? Come up and get him?
Well, they were already there. It's like you're getting in this pod.
It's all right. It's now all out the airlock with him.
But yeah, Tim Vert. What Tim Vert was saying was that while he was up on the International Space Station, one of his co-workers said, "Oh yeah, Earth's been trying to contact us. Like she'd become so disassociated with the world, and she just saw the whole of human society as just one." Globalized, mass whole, but that's what we are. We don't see it that way.
Well, I think they say that a lot of pretty much all people who go into space do have that kind of thought. They look back at Earth and just have this kind of almost kind of euphoric, kind of terrified kind of feeling of just how insignificant. Like just looking. I'm just trying to imagine what that would be like looking and being able to see with your vision where all of human history has happened.
Yeah. Well, not all of human
history. Well, yeah. All bar a tiny, tiny amount of human history.
Like, we now live in the 21st century. This isn't like a 220-year period sort of when technology was vaguely advancing, only in a very short space of that, really. It wasn't... You'd had the printing press. Up to that point, but other than that,
it's the invention of the steam engine, which is sort of mid to late 18th century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then after that, obviously,
it starts to
steamroll.
Hey, Bush, still got those terrible puns, folks. But this is the point. The point is that after that, you can understand why steamships on the horizon are just like, what the hell are those black ships?
Those
black evil ships.
If you've been looking, if you've been used to little sailing
boats with guys with swords, and all of a sudden you got a rifle.
You just got this. I mean,
a Winchester pointing at your face.
You'd probably think it was a monster, wouldn't you? Like,
well, that's
this big metal thing coming towards you.
So they were called black ships with an evil mane because they just had the smog. They had the smoke coming up.
Out of the smokestacks.
That's exactly it. But we are now in a point where we know what's out there in the world, and we're pulling away because we've got this idea that we're going to be something better, but we're not. No. We're not better. Like
British exceptionalism, I think, is a massive problem. That we think that we are the best in the world, and there is no shame in not being the best in the world at every little thing. And the thing is that we aren't the best in the world at every little thing, and pulling away from other countries politically, economically, is probably not going to do us very well.
It's interesting because the Dutch have become quite big players in this because the UK has a special relationship with America, but the Dutch have gone, well, we'll be America's access to, we'll be their gateway to the EU, and that's just what the Dutch will do because as we can tell, they were Japan's gateway to the rest of the world. They were their sort of like only sort of real knowledge of the rest of the world for quite a long time, and so there's no reason why the Dutch can't do that again. And we will be like those Japanese merchants who were sort of stranded for 13 years during the Reformation period, where they were like, "No, we're going to completely lock down our borders. You can't come back because you've been tainted." And except we'll be on a car park in Kent instead. So I think it's a shame. I think it's interesting the fact that Japan has developed in the way that it has. It's,
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe in 200 or 300 years, people will be coming to Britain going, wow, this culture's so weird. It's such a weird place because we've isolated ourselves for 200 years. So we end up just being really, really fucking strange compared to everywhere else.
But we don't manufacture pretty little paper fans with like cherry blossom on them. We manufacture Eccles cakes. So,
There's nothing wrong with Eccles cakes.
There's nothing wrong with Eccles
cherry
cakes.
Bakewells.
But you can't keep yourself cool. I mean, I bought several Eccles cakes. Yeah, I bought fans as well.
What else do we manufacture? Football hooliganism.
Uncle Joe's mint balls. We could be sponsored by those as well if Uncle Joe's listening. We are local. Football hooliganism, which the Polish have already beaten us at.
Oh yeah,
so,
that's true.
They have got that one down
They've
pat.
got that.
We could invent our own religion around bulldogs or I don't know.
we don't need to. We've already invented our own religions quite enough times, to be honest. Like fucking the Church of England, like, Protestantism. How many wars has that caused around the world? Like,
Multiple.
how many deaths has that caused? And that's from Henry VIII, really, isn't it? It's
Just
gave
wanting
it the legitimacy.
more than one wife. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this one's still alive. Yeah, you can't divorce her though. Oh, I don't want her anymore. Can't I trade her in? No. All right. I'm gonna get another bride. Yeah, I'm just gonna chop her head off though. I don't have to do it. I could divorce her. I'm just gonna kill her though. Okay. I think the point is that it's always a small minority of people trying to consolidate their power and trying to make money. That's basically it, and that's what causes these things. And I don't think we should hold truck with it, but it's too late.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And to be honest, like in terms of Brexit, I don't really want to think about the conversation of, oh well, should we rejoin the EU? It's just like it's done now. It's done, and I cannot. To be honest, I don't want the next, in 10 years' time, all the elections being about should we rejoin the EU? Then 10 years after that, should we leave again?
It won't be leave, but we probably will. We'll rejoin the EU.
Yeah, we've left, and I think now it's more a case of like, what should our relationship be with the EU? And you'll get some leaders who are more open to, and some parties who are more open to being more globalized and accessible, and you'll get some that are more isolationist, and the ones we've got at the moment are more isolationist. But it's how badly can they fuck us until we could not do that?
It's a very disingenuous reason for isolation. Though it's not like, oh, they're polluting our culture. It's literally just, well, we're disaster capitalists and we want to make money. So we're just going to short against the UK economy, and that's dreadful. Speculation, economic speculation is the worst. But they didn't even have that in the shogunate. So they just believed that we were bad because we ate lamb. Don't eat sheep; they're lovely. That's their advice, not mine. If you want to eat lamb, that's your decision.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a vegan, so I feel contractually obliged to say don't eat lamb. But yeah, then again, I'm going to go against the stereotypes of what people think about vegans and go, it's your own damn choice, and I'm not going to come and influence you.
Just make sure that you use a knife and fork. Otherwise, if you do that in a foreign culture where they do use cutlery and they see you not using cutlery, they might ban people for 220 years going, these people are pigs.
Yeah, very true. Well, I think that probably just about covers it.
Yep, I mean, that I've said all I can say with the knowledge of...
Not so much of a mystery this week. Oh, there was one thing I did want to mention, actually. So I have over the last couple of weeks, I've had film recommendations. I've got a book recommendation this time. And so the book is called The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet. And it's a book by David Mitchell, who, not the comedian, the author of Cloud Atlas. And the Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, it's Jacob de Zoet, the title character. He is a Dutch trader, and it's set in Dejima, in Edo period Japan.
Is it?
Which is why I had heard of this at all and thought it would be quite interesting. So yeah, it's actually it a lot of the historical things that we've been talking about are involved in this, but it's a really kind of magical, really interesting story that I didn't expect that I would be into. Like, I thought a period piece in Japan, I thought, don't know if that's going to be my kind of thing, but actually, yeah, it's a really well told story with lots of really interesting and well fleshed out characters, and there is this sort of magical kind of mysterious element to it as well, which is really cool. So that's my recommendation. AJ's got a few DVDs that I think he wants to talk about.
I was going to recommend Zatoichi, which is a movie about a blind samurai. I haven't got this with me, but if I'm recommending any film by Akira Kurosawa, I'm going to recommend Ikuru, which means to live, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's about a man who has cancer, and he decides that he's wasted his life, and he wants to build a children's park, and it goes from there. But it makes me cry every time I see it. So I recommend that highly, folks.
Well, there we go. I think this will end up being a fairly short episode. Might end up being shorter than our bonus, but that's fine. We don't have producers telling us how long we've got to make our episodes. So that's cool. And I think after having some of the marathons that we've had in the past, probably good to have a few shorter ones so people don't get bored. So we will be back in 2 weeks when we have another episode that's similar to this, i.e. it's about a place rather than a mystery per se, although this place is more mysterious because it's very, very old. We'll be talking about Göbekli Tepe, an archaeological site, the most ancient archaeological site in the world, located in modern-day Turkey. Yeah, we'll be chatting about that, which should be fun. We're not going to go down the Graham Hancock route,
aren't we?
I mean, we could talk about him. We could have a laugh at all the mad things he says about Göbekli Tepe. But
I quite like Graham Hancock. Just to
I like him, and I think a lot of his ideas are interesting, but he's just very unscientific.
I just think it's really hilarious that
like,
basically he tries to sort of put himself as a legitimate person, and then he's very into sort of talking about psychedelic drugs. He's like, yeah, I've done DMT and I've done loads of mushrooms. Like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, his ideas are really interesting, and I think there's probably quite a bit of weight to some of the things he says. But yeah, because he doesn't have a scientific approach of how he talks about these things, it's just pure speculation, a lot of it.
Well,
that gets mixed up with stuff that is actually more provably true. It's just, I think it's kind of frustrating because, yeah, there's probably actually quite a lot of stuff that is interesting and very important in what he's saying that gets lost because of the kind of the mad way he presents it.
I agree with that, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, I guess I'm going to have to read Fingerprints of the Gods, which I bought a long time ago and is as thick as a phone book. So that's, so that's going to be...
Yeah, I will... I need to do quite a lot of research on Göbekli Tepe. But yeah, looking forward to talking about that because that should be quite a good bit of fun. And as we discussed earlier, it finally gives me the turn to struggle with place names that from languages that I do not speak. And yeah, I will struggle with quite a bit. So we will see you then. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, folks. Have a good night or day.